Hello.
Hi, friends.
You might have heard me finish my countdown. I accidentally clicked on my volume scale. So anything you want to add before we get into it?
Hope everybody's week's going good.
Yeah. I'll be positive this week.
That last episode last week was kind of a long one.
Yeah. Make sure you worked on your chakras, or at least maybe look into working on your chakras. I think that's probably a good idea.
If you worked on them, let us know.
Yeah, if you did, if you took any of our advice at all, we're not chakra professionals, but if you took any of our advice at all, let us know.
We're not generally the type of people that advise you.
Yeah, we really wouldn't. Advice. I'm not real sure if you want to. Luckily, professionals did write the source material. All right. Well, let's get into it. This week, I so graciously wrote the entire episode because it is one of my special interests, and I wanted to, I didn't do it exactly the way that I wanted to because I just didn't have time. But
she finished writing it an hour ago.
This is the one that I finished writing in between episodes we were recording. So this is all about the royals, but it's not like modern royals. You're not going to hear about Princess Diana in this one, even though that's my Roman Empire. How often do you think of Princess Diana?
Me?
Yeah.
Literally never.
Me every day.
I don't know that I have a Roman Empire.
Well, see, so she died the day, technically, it was the day of my birthday. So, on my birthday here, that was all that was on TV that year. So, I don't know. So, it rewired my brain. And I quite literally think about her every day.
I just don't know what my Roman Empire would be. What would my Roman Empire be?
I have no idea. You'll think of it one day, and then you'll be like, I really do be thinking about that every day.
It depends on my season, honestly. Yeah. Because, there are times when it's all I think about is music or a specific artist.
Yeah.
And then there are times
that reminds me, I do want to recommend some music.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Hit it.
So, I mentioned a couple episodes back that I went to the Ryman to see Sierra Farrell, and I should have mentioned it then, but I didn't. So, this album's been out for a few weeks now, but her new album, Trail of Flowers, is out, and there is a song on there called Chitlin. Is it Chitlin Cooking Time in Cheatham County? Where's my phone?
In Cheatham County?
Yeah. So, it's an old song. It was written originally in, I think, 1932. But there's a lot of songs. Yeah. Chitlin Cooking Time in Cheatham County. And then there's a few songs. I think this album for me is a no skips. I don't have any skips on this album, but I do have favorites. And that one is one of mine. And the other is Rosemary. I love that song. Yeah. She also has one on there called Wish You Well, which is basically so, we were talking about the congressman, and it would be along those lines, but it's her wishing the person that did this shitty stuff to her well, and I'm like, couldn't be me. Couldn't be me. I hope that man stubs his baby toe every day.
Last time I said that to somebody being snarky, Karma got back to me, and I broke my freaking foot. X-ray said that was not the truth, but it certainly felt like it. No, I don't. Music has not played a huge part of my life lately. There for a while it was all I could talk about, all I was thinking about.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you the last time I really delved into music.
Well, I highly recommend this album if you feel so inclined.
I'm sorry. This week, my thing has been, I started watching because I have never before watched Grey's Anatomy.
I haven't either. I've thought about it, but I'm like, that's a lot.
I'm only on season 2, I think.
How many seasons are there?
I'm not sure. Surely.
Listen to this. I'm going to ruin some people's day. Hey, Google, how many seasons of Grey's Anatomy are there?
Grey's Anatomy has 20 seasons.
Oh!
not.
I was literally about to say, surely it can't be quite as bad as Supernatural, but guess
It's got
what?
more. It's got more. And
Guess
it's
what?
It's still going, isn't it?
I have no idea.
Okay, Google. Is Grey's Anatomy still on the air?
According to Wikipedia, as of February 13th, 2023, the show has been picked up for a 20th season.
Oh.
It premiered on March 14th, 2024.
So it's currently in its 20th season. Okay, stop. Stop.
Look for the link in your Google Home or Google Assistant app.
Thank you.
I'm here to help.
So I hope I had a bunch of Google devices tell you about Grey's Anatomy as well.
Now I'm kind of regretting my decisions because I'm sucked in. So I'm in for the long
Hey,
haul.
you've got a lot of content. That'll be your Roman Empire. It's Grey's Anatomy.
for the next 6 months. Oh,
all right. So what I have chosen for us to do today is, so on TikTok, like I had an abundance of them. Like my algorithm really said, for you.
I started to say, we know
So-
now what your For You is.
I had a bunch of like historical TikToks, and it was like weird facts of the royals or weird facts from history and da 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 da. So I saved all these TikToks and I wrote all of these things down in a notebook. And I was like, how am I going to format this episode? So I was like, oh, I could do like a fact or fiction situation. So, that's basically what I've done is like I've taken, we'll say the fact or the blurb that was on TikTok, and then I dove into whether or not that's actually true or if it's partially true, or a lot of them were actually true, but some of them were kind of a little embellished. But I will proudly let you read the first one.
Okay. I already read it.
The whole thing?
Not all of it. So the first one, when King Henry VIII died, he was placed into a coffin where he then exploded. Blood ran down the coffin and fell to the ground where dogs began to lick it up. So this one seems to be kind of true. Henry VIII died in the early hours of January 28th of 1547. When he died, he was only 55, but was a bloated, smelly version of himself, and his body was covered in boils. His death was kept secret for 2 days, and his body lay undisturbed in his bed while a ruse was set to make it appear that he was still alive, including someone delivering meals to him. It wasn't announced to Parliament that he had died until the 31st. After this, court embalmers began to preserve the king's body. They removed the organs and stuffed him with sawdust, resin, and herbs, but since so much time had passed, since he himself had passed, he was quite decomposed already. He was placed into a lead coffin and surrounded by burning tapers and laid in state before being moved to the chapel. On February 14th, the procession set off from Westminster to Windsor, where he was to be laid to rest with his favorite wife, Jane Seymour. The procession stopped overnight at Sion House, where the coffin was carried into the chapel and left unattended overnight. According to some accounts, the jostling of the carriage on the trip caused gases from the decomposition to explode, which resulted in the separation of the lead plates that the body was enclosed in. Some said that the explosion was within the coffin and the coffin didn't explode, but all of the accounts say that in the dead of the night, the coffin began to leak, and the next morning it was found that a dog had wandered into the chapel and was licking up the matter. The king was...
It was described quite grossly, and I really didn't want to get into that.
The king was still taken to Windsor and laid to rest in the same vault as Jane Seymour, favorite wife and mother of the new boy king, Edward VI.
So, that was kind of true. So, mine is Queen Elizabeth I, which I think we're all kind of familiar with, was actually kind of gross. And her teeth were rotting, causing her speech to be poor, and her skin was basically rotting off from bad makeup choices. So as far as her teeth go, this one may or may not be true. So in Tudor England, sugar wasn't something that was readily available, but during her reign, there was an increase in importation of sugar. It was imported from Morocco. It was said that Queen Elizabeth I had a sugar addiction and had lost many teeth due to her sugary diet, which included brushing her teeth with honey.
What?
Foreign ambassadors would say that her missing teeth made her more difficult to understand. She was said to have a tremendous fear of dentists, or at that time they were called barber dentists, despite needing several teeth removed. She was scared, and before she would agree to any procedures, one of her bishops had to prove to her that the pain was not that bad, which I assume means that he had a tooth pulled to demonstrate that it really wasn't that bad. With sugar being considered a luxury, and with the wealthy losing their damn teeth, the non-wealthy wanted to be more like them and would find ways to blacken their teeth.
Ew.
And one of the most common knowledge facts about Elizabeth I was that her makeup might be what killed her. So when Elizabeth was in her late 20s, she contracted smallpox, and this left many scars and blemishes on her face. Elizabeth was very vain and was obsessed with her looks, and this was when she began to wear that pale white makeup during the Elizabethan era, and the upper class considered this pale skin look to be beautiful. In the 16th century, there was this makeup available called Venetian cerise. This was a skin bleach that was highly sought after and was most often used to conceal scars. The makeup was made up of vinegar and white lead from Venice. These days, we know that lead is poisonous, and over time, the Venetian cerise would cause hair loss and skin shedding, which is something that Elizabeth struggled with as she got older. Because she was known to be so vain, this caused her much distress and depressed her as she grew older and closer to the end of her life. She even refused to have any mirrors in the rooms that she spent her time in. Not only did she exhibit the physical symptoms of lead poisoning, she was also showing signs of losing her cognitive ability, as well as symptoms of delirium. Elizabeth was also quite stubborn and would try to continue like there was nothing wrong with her, and she would refuse to rest and would just stand up for hours, and it's believed that this was most likely because she was afraid that if she sat down, she wouldn't get back up. She also refused to allow doctors to examine her, again, most likely out of the fear that they would inform her that she was dying. It is impossible to know for sure if her makeup is what ultimately caused her death, because she did not have a postmortem autopsy.
Well, we back on the Henry VIII bus.
I think you'll enjoy this one.
Henry VIII had a groom of the stool who would help him undress and use the bathroom while people watched. Nasty.
Yeah.
This was definitely a role that existed during the reign of King Henry VIII. It was created to assist the king's bowel movements. The stool referenced the portable commode that would have been carried around at all times, in addition to water, towels, and a wash bowl. The groom of the stool would monitor the king's diet and meal times and would have organized his day around when he predicted that the king might need to drop the kids off at the playground. I'm assuming there was no water in this travel toilet, being, so like not the kids off at the pool.
Yeah, so there's no pool for them to go to.
Right.
They're just on the ground.
All right.
Or in a bucket.
This job was most often awarded to the sons of noblemen or other members of the gentry, and over time, these boys would act more as personal secretaries to the king and were often paid handsomely and enjoyed the benefit of excellent lodgings and or the sovereign's hand-me-downs, and the option to have any of the used bedchamber furnishings, which honestly, I would expect nothing less than all that for having to follow some big old boy around who you just know had the biggest, stinkiest poos. It has been thought that the groom of the stool also wiped the king's ass, but there was no historical documents to back up this claim. But he definitely would have helped the king to undress for each poo.
So maturely written.
Right. This role existed in the monarchy all the way until 1901 when King Edward VII abolished it. Good on him.
He was probably like, I don't need anybody watching me. I don't need anybody to help me undress.
Hey, listen, you've got minor experience in this field.
True. Very true. But I haven't done it since, and I don't plan on doing it again.
That was a big poo, too.
Well.
She had to help me when I had my initial car wreck that shattered my hip back 14 years ago. Because Maddie.
Why do I feel like I've lived 5 lifetimes since then?
Right. Maddie was like 1. Sure.
Yeah,
just about to turn 1.
Yeah, she was itty bitty.
So.
I guess I did have to wipe her butt a couple times too.
She did. What, Maddie's?
Yeah.
Anyway, had the wreck. And had a big surgery, laid up in bed, not able to put weight on one leg at all, in a wheelchair for a while, pain medication, constipation, finally deciding to catch up with me, used the bathroom, and needed help, and Brittany had to wipe my butt.
Yeah.
That's a real friend.
Yeah. I think I blocked it out, because, I remember, the time leading up to it, but I don't remember actually doing it. And
you absolutely.
Then I remember.
I feel like you helped me take a shower too.
I do remember that. I don't know. I probably blacked it out, so I wouldn't remember.
All I remember is sitting on, because it wasn't like the actual toilet.
No, it was one of those little
chairs.
Yeah.
At the foot of the bed.
So
crying.
You have something in common with King Henry VIII. Yeah. You two have pooed in a bucket.
I have. But I was bawling because it hurt so bad.
Bless it.
Anyway, continue on.
So, my next one was the execution of Margaret Pole, the Countess of Salisbury, so botched that she was struck over 10 times over her neck, shoulders, and head. So Margaret Pole was the daughter of George, the Duke of Clarence, and his wife, Lady Isabella Neville, she was born on August 14th, 1473 at Farley Castle near Bath. She married Sir Richard Pole in 1491, and they had 5 children before she was left widowed in 1505. At the beginning of Henry VIII's reign, Margaret was very much in favor, and the king allowed her to become the 8th Countess of Salisbury, and she became the godmother and governess of his daughter Mary. But things went sideways when Margaret's son, Reginald Pole, spoke out against the annulment of the king's marriage to Catherine of Aragon. And it got even worse when he published a book that denounced King Henry VIII's policies. This insult made Henry want to seek revenge against the entire Pole family, and the king now saw Margaret as a threat. In November of 1538, several members of the Pole family were arrested on charges of treason and were taken to the Tower of London, and in January of 1539, many of them were executed. For the Tudor times, Margaret was considered to be elderly at the age of 65, but she was still questioned and taken to Cowdray House near Midhurst. In May 1539, a bill of attainder, which is basically a search warrant, was issued against her, and a tunic displaying the 5 wounds, a symbol used in the Northern rebellions, was said to be found in her belongings and used against her as evidence. She was subsequently stripped of her titles and was imprisoned in the Tower of London. And after 2 years of imprisonment, she was to be executed on May 27th, 1541. And due to her being born a noble, her execution was private. There were 2 accounts that exist of her execution. The first said that the executioner was inexperienced and missed her neck the first time and gashed into her shoulder, and that it took 10 more blows to finish her off. The second account says that she somehow escaped the block and was taken down by the executioner as she ran, and that 11 blows was required. In either event, she did have an awful end to her life for something that she had no part of in the first place.
That's awful.
Yeah.
Did Henry VIII see the ghost of his wives? Supposedly, after Henry VIII had his second wife, Anne Boleyn, executed, he said that he would see her without her head, crawling like a spider, shouting, "Henry, I need help looking for my head. Can you help me find it? Henry, please." In the spirit of Catherine Howard, the spirit of Catherine Howard was also supposedly seen running to Henry for mercy. I was able to find a lot of ghost stories of Henry VIII and his 6 wives. However, Brittany was not able to find anything that said that Henry himself experienced any haunting by his wives, but that one of Anne Boleyn is a pretty good one.
Yeah. I'd be terrified.
Right.
My next one is, I think this is going to be a short episode. So did Queen Victoria have to share a bedroom with her mother until she was 18 years old? So when Victoria wasn't even a year old, her father, Edward, Duke of Kent, died of pneumonia, which left the girl to be raised by her mother. Following his death, Victoria's mother, Duchess Victoria, prepared herself to rule alongside her daughter should her uncle die and she ascend the throne before she was of age. Due to this, Victoria's mother used a strict code of discipline called the Kensington system to shape Victoria into the future queen. This meant that Victoria didn't get to have anything close to a normal childhood and was very rarely allowed to interact with children her own age, and she was under constant adult supervision, including sharing a bedroom with her mother until she became queen at the age of 18. When Victoria became queen, her first act was to demand that she had an hour alone.
I don't blame her.
Not at all. These next two are kind of on the long side.
Okay. Queen Victoria hated being pregnant, thought breastfeeding was disgusting, thought babies were ugly, and just had an overall dislike of small children. First of all, being pregnant is, for me, not great.
She was pregnant 9 times.
Ugh. When Queen Victoria married Prince Albert, yes, the one in a can, she was open about how much she enjoyed the physical pleasures of her new marriage. The couple were simply enamored with one another, and she often wrote in her diaries about their thriving sex life. Due to this enjoyment, she did become pregnant quite quickly and gave birth to her first daughter almost exactly 9 months after the wedding. Victoria did enjoy the sexual aspects of her marriage, but really struggled with pregnancies that resulted from this and called it the shadow side of marital life. She complained a lot about the physical, mental, and emotional toll the pregnancies took and referred to herself as nothing more than a breeding animal. Despite this, she and Albert had 9 children over the course of 17 years. Historians believe that Victoria suffered from postpartum depression following many of her births, and this added more difficulties for the already difficult life of the monarch. Adding to this, she was forced to hand over much of her daily work to Albert as she was pregnant and then confined. Albert was totally capable of doing these additional responsibilities, but she was quite annoyed at having to give up even a little bit of control. Adding to the notion that Victoria may have been suffering from postpartum depression is that she had a very difficult time bonding with her children when they were infants. After the birth of her second child, Bertie, the Queen reported having hallucinations and deeply feared that she was losing her mind. She would write letters to her daughters and warn them of pregnancy, saying lowness and a tendency to cry. It is what every lady suffers with, more or less, and what I, during my first confinements, suffered dreadfully with. She would go on to write about her distaste for newborns, saying, abstractedly, I have no tender for them till they have become a little human. An ugly baby is a very nasty object, and the prettiest is frightful when undressed.
Can you imagine talking about your baby like that?
Albert was much more affectionate with the children, but he had a strict system when it came to their education. He ensured that their lessons were filled with languages, history, math, science, art, and more practical skill learning such as gardening and so on. That was meant for Queen Victoria's children. Hold on. Yeah. This was meant for Queen Victoria's children to be the antithesis of earlier generations of Victoria's family. And as far as breastfeeding went, she was also deeply critical of it and thought it was a ruin for intelligent young women. She loathed the breastfeeding so much that when she found out that her daughters had chosen to breastfeed, she wrote in her diary, "It makes my hair stand on end that my daughters have turned into cows." So it is safe to say that she actually did have a dislike of being pregnant, babies in general, and breastfeeding. I wonder what she would say about women who will now breastfeed at the table in a restaurant or in a park or wherever they need to. She probably tell them they need to go to the bathroom and do that. Facts. First of all, let me just speak out and say, as a mother of 3, I breastfed all 3 of my children at least for a short amount of time. Maddie was like a whole 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Gemma
she had,
was
like, latching issues.
Yeah, Maddie didn't latch really well. Gemma, 9 months. And Easton, like, probably about 9 weeks. I'm not even gonna lie to tell you, I hated being pregnant. The giving birth process was not awful. I did have some scary stuff going on with Easton, but it wasn't awful. Would I want to do it again? Absolutely not. But I will say, like, the breastfeeding portion of it, and as someone who has done it, talking to someone who has never experienced it, you're not going to understand, but it is like the most beautiful thing ever.
Yeah.
And it's
like, I've heard that it's such a bonding experience.
Oh, absolutely. But here's my weirdness for the day, okay? There is nothing more satisfying than the feeling of when the child is feeding and you have that letdown and you feel that shit pulling from, like, your armpit down.
That's weird.
Oh, it's like, it hurts, but it's like a relief.
Yeah.
Oh, it was like fantastic. Especially like if you're like, it's been a while since they've fed and you're like super like full and it's starting to get kind of painful.
Yeah.
Man. But it was, I mean, I wouldn't have had it any other way. I really wish I could have fed Easton longer that way.
Like, it seems so weird that she would be so disgusted by it.
The only reason I quit feeding Gemma at 9 months is because we went on vacation and I wanted to drink. So
yeah, but like,
which is a very shallow reason to quit breastfeeding. But,
right, but it is what it is. But yeah, like, the only thing I can think of just to why she felt the way she felt about it was because, I mean, classically, the Victorian era, which was named after her in the first place,
right?
It was very what's the word I want to use? It was very, like, women weren't even supposed to show, like, ankles. So, like, I could understand why she would find breastfeeding to be gross. I just couldn't imagine, like, looking at one of my own children and being like, that is ugly.
I do remember.
And she did that 9 times.
Right. I do remember when Maddie was born, we were sitting in the hospital and, like, I looked at her and then I looked at her dad and I looked back at her and I was like, she looks like your mom. And that wasn't like a negative thing.
Yeah.
But it was just the funniest. Like, to me, looking back at it, I'm like, I don't know how he took that. Do I care? No. But, I mean, but as a mom, I think all of my children were beautiful as babies.
I wasn't even a mom, and I thought your babies were cute.
I make pretty cute babies.
I mean, I've seen ugly babies.
Well, yeah.
But yeah.
I make cute ones, and then they grow up to be pretty cute, too. That boy of mine is absolutely heartbreakingly cute, and is going to be a force to be reckoned with. He's getting freckles across his nose like Gemma has.
That's cute.
He's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
He's going to be a problem. I may have grandchildren out there that I don't know about someday.
I was going to say, better teach him some safety.
No glove, no love, son.
All right, I think this is the last one. So, Did Victoria truly go into the deepest mourning that anyone has ever seen when her husband, Prince Albert, died in 1861? So on the evening of Saturday, December 14th, 1861, Queen Victoria knew that the death of her husband was near, and at 10:50 p.m. he succumbed to typhoid fever, and the Queen vividly recalled how when she wrote about it in 1872. 2 or 3 long but perfectly gentle breaths were drawn, the hand clasping mine, and all was over. I stood up, kissed his dear heavenly forehead, and called out in a bitter and agonizing cry, "Oh, my dear darling," and then dropped on my knees in mute, distracted despair, unable to utter a word or shed a tear. Ernest Leningen and Sir C. Phillips lifted me up, and Ernest led me out. Victoria returned to the death chamber twice the next day and wrote to her eldest daughter that Prince Albert appeared beautiful as marble, and the features so perfect, though grown very thin. His body was not placed in the coffin until the 18th, which he died on the 14th, so 4 days later. And Queen Victoria did not look at him again and told her daughter, "I felt I would rather, as I now he wished, keep the impression given of life and health than have this one sad, though lovely image imprinted too strongly on my mind." She did not attend his funeral due to being too grief-stricken. Victoria is also had depended on the prince consort, as he was called, in many ways, from drafting letters to approving her dresses and bonnets. With her sudden source of support being gone, she was still able to exhibit some extraordinary moments of composure during the early days of her widowhood, when she remembered the advice that her husband had given her when her mother died. He said that she must control her feelings and not dwell on her sorrow, and she expressed determination to carry out her duties as the sovereign just like he would have wanted her to do. The only real comfort that Victoria expressed during this time was that she would follow him soon, and they would meet again in their eternal real home. And I believe, as I read, I didn't put this in here, but as I read, the two would read like spirituality books together and stuff. And so like they firmly believed that they would meet again in the afterlife. And then in order to maintain her belief that even the dead should be treated as though they were still living, she ordered that Prince Albert's private rooms at Windsor, Balmoral, and Osborne were to be left just as they were when he left them, and to be kept up as if he were going to come back and use them. Every night she had his clothes laid out and a jug of hot water and clean towels put into his dressing room. But she did have a photograph of his corpse hung over his side of the bed in each of the royal residences, and on her bedside, Victoria kept casts of the prince's face and hands that had been taken by the sculptor William Theed. She could not look at the death mask and knew that Prince Albert found things such as this distasteful, but the hands were a comfort to her, and when she had moments of deep despair, she would cling to them as she might have when he was alive. She also had commissioned numerous paintings and sculptures of the prince and found comfort in those as well. These served as vivid reinforcements to her belief that her husband was still watching over her. And just to note, Prince Albert made it well known that should he pass before Victoria, that he did not want any marble statues raised in his honor. But she did the exact opposite of this. And the first one was begun about 2 weeks after he died, and it was placed in the blue room where he did die. She had a lot of statues and busts created to memorialize the prince consort. It seemed as though everyone in the family received a bust or figure of the prince consort, even her godsons. Like anybody that, because she had 9 children who had 40, it was either 42 or 45 children of their own collectively. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And like everybody got one.
Dang.
She even went as far to be sure that there was a written history of her life with Albert, which was intended to be given to their children and grandchildren and then passed down through the generations. However, she feared that it would fall into the wrong hands and be published possibly in a garbled form, and so it was decided that it would be publicly available, and the first volume was published in 1867 and goes from when Prince Albert was just a bouncing baby boy through to the first year of his marriage to Victoria. The reason she requested that these biographies be written was so that the public could see the extent of her loss and maybe reflect on her view of her husband. After his death, he assumed the status of a saint to her, and like his, like the hand sculpture, hair clippings she had of his became like artifacts, or what do they call them? Rites, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were like very sacred pieces for her. And it was not unheard of for there to be extravagant displays of grief during this era. But there were generally, these were generally for a specific amount of time, and the widow should not remarry for a period of time after the loss, which I learned at something I'll talk about in a minute. I went to a Victorian mourning traditions, like mourning, what is the word? It's lost. Anyway, things that people did for mourning back in that Victorian era. But usually it was like 2 years for women. They couldn't remarry after they lost a husband. There were rumors circulating that the Queen would get over her loss and remarry, but she thought this was totally unthinkable. And for Victoria, no one could replace Prince Albert in her eyes, and her mourning would never cease. She ordered that official mourning should be for the longest term in modern times. She began to use paper that was blacked out in the margins and wore widow's weeds, which just meant all black clothing, and a widow's cap, which would be a veil, totally covering the face. And she did this until the last days of her life. It was not uncommon for busts, portraits, or statues to be made to memorialize the dead during these times, but Victoria stuffed her residences with memorial images of her husband in a manner that far exceeded 19th century practices, and her position and personal wealth allowed her to indulge in this enthusiasm for mourning and monuments. And a few weeks ago, I went to a museum in Clarksville and attended a presentation on Victoria-era mourning practices, that was the word I was looking for, and learned some new things. So, the woman presenting wore almost all traditional mourning garb from that era, but it was hot in the little auditorium, so she didn't have on her little hat and veil, and she had taken off her gloves because she said she was sweating. And so I don't know how Queen Victoria would have walked around in this stuff with like no air conditioning. I bet it was a stinky time. But she also talked about the mourning period for women, which was about 2 years. And I think like during the latter half, it was called something else. It wasn't full mourning. It was something else, where they would start to wear, incorporate things like flowers or something into their clothing. So like they would still wear black, but they could incorporate like purple flowers or whatever. And this meant that they were like at half mourning or whatever the term was.
Right.
And women also during this mourning period weren't allowed to be seen while they were in mourning. And even Queen Victoria was hardly ever seen after the death of her husband. She made very few public appearances in the 40 years she lived after he died. This woman also talked about the differences between a coffin and a casket. So a coffin is six-sided and tapered at the head and feet and is wide at the shoulders. And caskets are what we use today most commonly, and they're just a rectangular box. They also had, back in the day, so the coffins were wooden, and they would have these fancy little name tags on them that were usually like gold or silver or whatever. And with the coffins being wooden, they disintegrated quite quickly, and grave robbers would steal the little gold name tags off the coffins. And this lady had 2 of them. So, and it's also worth noting that men didn't have to adhere to the same mourning practices and could just remarry whenever they were ready.
That's bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that was my first tiptoe into the Royals. If anybody enjoyed that at all, I can do something else with that in the future, because this was a little bit thrown together in haste because I did not perform good time management. So, it wasn't, we're 40 minutes in.
Well, there you go. I mean, listen, the last episode was an hour and a half, so
Yeah.
you guys are due a shorter one. You've got the nonprofit for the week.
Oh crap, I didn't find one.
Oh no.
Oh no, give me a minute.
You've got a list. Don't you?
I have one written in this book. Hold on. And I actually saw somebody else post about it the other day. It has absolutely nothing to do with the subject matter, but it is called the Rainbow Youth Project. And I've seen, I think Mama Tot posted about it on TikTok, and a guy whose username is Shining Nathan. He's like a Southern auntie. It is just the best.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
I love him. So let me see about us. I'm a mess over here. Shit. So here at Rainbow Youth Project USA, we see the value in everyone. We want to be a catalyst for positive change, and despite being a new, spontaneous, and organic organization, we plead to be continuously driven by the same ideas we initially founded our organization upon, which is support, empowerment, and progress. Dealing with the ever-evolving challenges facing LGBTQIA plus young people today requires problem solvers who bring different perspectives and are willing to take risks. The Rainbow Youth Project emerged out of a pursuit to inspire and support the community and a desire for actions to speak louder than words, and we are dedicated to walking the walk. With the help of our donors and partners, we strive to build and foster accepting and welcoming communities for our young LGBTQIA plus siblings and their families, while also supporting and promoting political candidates who share our core values. Together, we can make a better tomorrow. And if you feel so inclined, I will leave a link to donate directly. If you don't feel inclined, that's okay too. We're not sipping the haterade. Not all the time anyway.
Right.
I can't speak for tomorrow.
This is true.
But anyway, so that is our...
You said that, and Amara looked at me like her literal expression was.
Amara.
She gave me the look like, this bitch lying.
She's like, she's a hater through and through.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming to another week. Here is your weekly reminder of the little festival thing that we are going to be at here, over in Ashland City, at the Heart of the Hollow, on May 11th.
When will this episode be going up? Let me look.
Well, this is all for April, so.
Oh, you're right. I forgot. I forgot this is still March.
Yes. So make sure if you're local to that area, come and come talk to us.
Yeah. Get some little freebies.
Right.
Get some cool stuff.
Check out all the other vendors.
Yeah.
'Cause
We
who
should
knows,
make- we
whatever
should-
you buy might
listen.
put food on somebody's table.
That's true. But listen, so we should take some new photos before then of us looking cute. And if anybody wants an autograph, we can give it to them. Ain't nobody gonna want
I don't
that.
think it's that serious.
Ain't nobody gonna want that.
If you want something autographed, bring it.
Yeah, because we're not bringing anything.
Like we might,
We're not gonna be that
we
prepared.
might could bring like a silver Sharpie to sign the things that we're giving out.
Maybe
If
if anybody
it-
wants
if it's-
that,
if
but
it's-
probably not.
Anyway, so make sure that you, when you go and look for that event on Facebook, while you're out there, make sure that you're casting your social media circle and following us on Facebook,
Instagram,
TikTok,
X.
sending us your topic ideas, constructive criticisms, complaints, whatever, to our email at wanderersofweird.
at gmail.com.
Yes, ma'am. And then,
Hell yeah, brother.
hell yeah, brother. While you're at it, go check out our Amazon wish list and get us these new tables.
Yeah,
that we want.
I'd really like a new table. I hate this one. It's
we-
not so bad. It suits the need, but
Yeah.
it is a pain in the rear.
For sure. All right, guys. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.